viewers, thank you for joining us. You're watching OBN Horn of Africa. This is Future Africa Spotlight. Today, I'm joined by renowned Pan-Africanist historian and author from South Africa via Zoom, Honorable Joshua Maponga. Thank you for joining me.
Greetings to you and all the viewers around the world.
All right, thank you. As we all know, Ethiopia is fighting neo-colonialism alone. What do you know about the imperialists' neo-colonialism activity in Ethiopia?
Firstly, we need to understand the issue of the colonial mindset in terms of the dominant cultures. And the dominant culture right now on the international political arena is the European narrative. Basically, these are the Europeans and the Americans, whom we know for a fact that their economies are built on slavery, their economies are built on racism, their economies are built on oppression, but above all, their economies are built on war. You can go back as far as Roosevelt, you can look at Bush, you can look at Clinton, you can look at Obama, you can look at even Carter. All American presidents are involved in war, from China to Japan to Vietnam to Czechoslovakia to Afghanistan to Iraq to Libya and Congo. And of late, we are not mixing our words. The Americans have now pointed their guns towards Africa. Basically, that is Ethiopia. And we know why this is happening, because the American government, the American economy is founded on bloodshed and war. The biggest companies that are in America are companies that are producing weapons. And as long as there is peace around the world, the American economy will not stand. So firstly, we want to admonish all the African governments, starting off with the African Union, that if there was a time when we needed to gather together as Africans to fight imperialism and neo-colonialism, we need as Africans to say, when you attack one African, you have attacked all of us. And it's not, I'm not mixing my words. It's Ethiopia today, it's Zimbabwe tomorrow, it's Congo the following day, it's Sudan the following day, because we know that if they can conquer Ethiopia, the whole idea is that of fighting the Chinese and the other European markets that are making their inroads into the African economy. And we say, if you believe in democracy as Americans, it will be important to come to the table of negotiations rather than sponsoring weapons and war and causing unrest on the African continent. So yes, the Ethiopian government right now and the Ethiopian people, whom I want to call the African people, are being attacked by the Europeans, basically the Americans. And the basis of the attack is the regime change, to make sure that they put a government that will be sympathizing with the Americans and cause the African people to be in poverty. And if Ethiopia can be overcome, because you are the last standing government on the whole of Africa, you have never been colonized by any European or any American. For them, this is a conquest, that if in this generation, Ethiopia can fall to a colonial government, then it is true that the whole of Africa has been overcome by colonialism. We want to challenge the Ethiopians and say, stand your ground and stand strong. If I had all the money in the world, I'll be flying to Ethiopia and joining in the war to make sure that we fight against this neo-colonialism. But again, because of borders, you are Zimbabwean, you are Zambian, you are Burkina Faso, you are Congolese, you are Cameroonian, we find that even our own governments do not have open borders where we can begin to support each other. But yes, let me qualify. The American war has nothing to do with the African's progress. It has everything to do with the colonialists putting their hands into the African economy and using small African economies to support that venture. I say no to neo-colonialism. I say no to the Americans sponsoring war in Ethiopia.
The US government is striving and seeking of regime change in Ethiopia, and it's using its Trojan horse TPLF to oust this administration, which is headed by Prime Minister Dr. Abiy Ahmed. How long would African nations being led by the blessing of the US?
If the American government wants a regime change in Ethiopia, we as Africans also must do a regime change in America. Simple. We have never gone to America and looked for a regime change. So if Americans want to get involved in changing regimes in Africa, we as Africans must also have the prerogative to be able to change regimes in Europe and in America in particular. But you notice we have never gone to America to ask for regime change. We have never sent our viewers and observers to go and observe American elections. We have never gone to America and influenced in any way their economy and their politics. And if there is sovereignty and power of a nation to rule itself, which we call self-determination, they must not get involved in changing regimes in Africa, because Africans don't have the same prerogative to come to their own countries and also call for regime change.
Okay, Ethiopia is indirectly invaded by Western powers these days, but there is no any African nation that supports this crisis and challenge that Ethiopia faced alone. What is expected from all African nations?
The Africa Union headquarters are in Ethiopia. And for that reason, I will not say that the African Union must be silent and quiet in terms of participating on the war that is happening in Ethiopia. Because if Ethiopia is taken over and our headquarters of Africa, which is in Addis Ababa, is already overtaken by the Europeans, which other center will Africa have as its source of power but the Africa Union? Therefore, the war in Ethiopia is not the war of Ethiopia, it is a war of Africa.
Ethiopia has never been colonized by foreign invaders, but these days the US government is keenly working to destabilize Ethiopia, saying regime change all over again, and working 24/7 in making the Ethiopian politics very volatile. Where does US get this mandate?
America is playing like a bully, like a bulldog, like a big brother on world politics. That they want their way. If you don't support the Americans, then you are either called a conspiracy theorist or you're called a terrorist. They've just walked out of Afghanistan like 2 months ago, where they had been waging war for the past 10, 12, 15 years, which they lost. So the idea is, and the question is, when they are coming to Ethiopia, what is it that the Americans want in Ethiopia? And if we cannot answer that question, we may find that our conversation does not hold water. But the question I'm asking you is, if there is something that is in Ethiopia that the Americans are looking for, the question is, what is it that they're looking for? And our greatest enemies right now are not the Americans. Our greatest enemies are Africans who have been given money by the Europeans, by the Americans, to fight their own brothers. You'll be shocked, my brother, as I'm talking to you, Messi, that Africans will be killing each other when Americans are sitting in their houses in America. So is it an American war, or it is a civil war where the Americans are sponsoring Ethiopians to kill each other?
Okay, the incumbent leadership, which is headed by Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed, got a popular vote and took the premiership again. But the West are not happy with its leadership. But he has got good support from its people. Why this paradox happen? Though it has a big support from its own nation, but the West detested its administration. Why this all irony is going on?
You cannot do politics with hungry people. We need to look at this in two ways. When an African leader gets into power and he does not empower his own people, he does not solve the problems for his own people, and he is bribed by the foreign nations, you will find that the politics of hunger is managed by the stomach. And when people are running politics from their stomachs, which is a hungry nation, is not governable at all. So firstly, we also need to start looking at what is it that the African leaders are doing, which exposes them to Western influences. Because when you allow your people to get hungry and someone else from outside comes with money, there is no way that your people are going to support you. So firstly, we need to look at the breakaway of Ethiopia, which started off with Eritrea, for example, which happened some 20 years ago. And now it is coming even to the Ethiopia mainland itself. That further, the war has not started now. The war and the strategy started long time ago, because by breaking Ethiopia into small little columns, and if the American government can manage to put its military base on the Horn of Africa, from there they can manage the entire of Sudan, the entire of Egypt, and we know why they are interested. The River Nile and the River Nile itself, and the dams that must be built along the River Nile, the oil that is in Sudan. Is it possible that when Ethiopia has been overcome, America will have access to the oil that is in Sudan? America will have access to the oil that is in Libya. America will have access to the economy of the north of Africa. That is the real question we need to ask ourselves. So it's not just about Ethiopia falling to the American government, but when America is sitting in Ethiopia, what is the effect and the impact of that takeover in Ethiopia to the surrounding nations? Is it possible that America cannot go to Sudan directly and they want to access Sudan through Ethiopia? Is it possible that America cannot access Libya directly? They want to access it through Ethiopia. So it is a strategic position that we need to discuss here. That is not only Ethiopia falling to the Americans, but it is the entire neighboring countries around Ethiopia that need to consider, from Kenya to Uganda to Congo to Sudan to Egypt to Chad to Burkina Faso to Guinea-Bissau, all those countries, to Cameroon itself and Central Africa. Why is it that America has picked up Ethiopia as a strategic position to which they can launch the war in Mali, for example? So it's not about Ethiopia. It's about the North and the Horn of Africa, and the Americans being able to put a military base through which they can be able to affect and influence the politics in the North and the Horn of Africa.
Okay. Prime Minister Dr. Abiy is known for his synergy philosophy and those homegrown ideologies and so forth. And it's mostly rated as a very pragmatic leader, but the West give blind eyes and deaf ears. They don't give a fig about this all ambition. Why?
You don't get into a relationship with someone whom you don't trust. And the American government is very sure that if they can have him in their back, he will be able to drive the agenda that they want to drive. This is, for me, as I said at the beginning, dominance politics. Ask yourself the question as an Ethiopian: why is the American government interested in taking over your country? What do they want to benefit? What is in it for them? You cannot tell me it's about poverty or anything else, because America is poverty. America has its own problems. But why would they find that helping and assisting an African government to achieve its democratic rights, what is it that will benefit the Americans? That is the real question Ethiopians need to ask themselves. And don't be led astray by this leader is like this leader is like this. Leaders are changeable, but the country is constant. But when a leader is in power, how much of his power is he going to use to benefit those who want to destroy the country? I would say shame on the prime minister if he will get in bed with Americans and he takes his own Ethiopian people to go and fight each other and kill each other while the Americans are sponsoring that war. That war is not about the Ethiopians. That war is about Americans. And if America wants to fight, it must come itself with its own soldiers and kill its own children to take over the land. But when they take the land, what is it that is in it for the Americans to benefit from the African economy?
Okay, the Bloomberg, Financial Times, and Foreign Policy published and came up with embarrassing headlines yesterday. The US troop should go to Ethiopia for long-lasting peace. Does that work out?
You want to study also the history of America and its wars. They want to come here for how long? How long were they in Afghanistan? How long were they in Syria? How long were they in Libya? How long were they in Japan? How long were they? Americans got their country from killing the Red Indians. American civilization and economy is built on wiping out an entire nation of the Red Indians and establishing themselves. According to my books, the Americans are the last people who can teach us about democracy. They don't even know how to spell the word democracy. Because if you believed in democracy as Americans, give back the land to the people who own the land in America. But the same thing they've been doing from Vietnam to Syria, to Iraq, to Libya, now they're in Ethiopia. The question is, has the American changed his way of doing business? And I'll tell you on your face, they've not changed their business. They've not changed their mindset. They've not changed their habits. The American continuously thinks that the way America is running, that's how the rest of the world must be run. Some of us are not interested in becoming Americans. We simply want to be Africans. So don't force yourself on everybody else thinking that we also want to become Americans. I don't want to become an American. I'm not interested in becoming an American.
Yeah, let me pause you here. So what is expected from the Ethiopian people and the Ethiopian government if the US government is letting its troops to come to Ethiopia?
You must take your troops to Washington, D.C.
How come?
Well, how come are they coming?
They're superpower, and we have never. Look, Africans never.
Now you agree.
Africans have never done that, but US used to do that for millennia. US troops has been in Vietnam, Japan, in Yemen, in Iraq, Iran. You see, in Libya, in Afghanistan, but we have never seen any African nations which sent its troops to other European and to the US.
Now you agree. Now you agree that when you have money and you are a superpower and you have money and you have weapons, that you can walk up to other countries that don't have money, that don't have weapons, and overthrow those governments for your own benefit. I don't call that democracy. No. I call that anarchy. I call that anarchy.
Yeah. We shouldn't have this dialogue for the sake of argument. This is reality.
Write a letter and call me the African presidents. All of them need to send soldiers immediately to Ethiopia to resist the American takeover. Because if Ethiopia is taken over, other countries are going to follow suit.
No, most African...
And we need...
It doesn't work out again, because I do have, I have a doubt, because many African leaders are a puppet which serve the US interest in Africa. So they wouldn't allow to send troops to Ethiopia to fight.
Okay. For. Then in that case,
that's our problem. You see.
In that case, surrender to the Americans, because there's nothing you can do. But I'm not here to tell you that you cannot do anything.
Appreciate it. It has been a year since the war has begun in Ethiopia. The conflict between the Ethiopian federal government and that of the Tigrayan forces being undergone till these days. And from day one up until these days, the US government is yelling about humanitarian aid and sanction. US is using sanction and aid as a carrot and a stick principle. How do you put this analogy?
You are not alone in this battle, because Zimbabwe is on sanctions also, like Ethiopia, where if the American government does not get to its way in how they want to run their politics, then they resort to dirty tricks such as sanctions. And the sanctions are in economic war on the people, because you are limiting the local people from accessing resources and funding. And sanctions are an act of inhuman behavior by the colonial estates and colonial states in how they want to manage African states. So you're not alone. If you're on sanctions as Ethiopia, in Zimbabwe, we are also on sanctions because we took away the land from the white people. Congo is in war, sponsored by the Americans. Mali is in war. Nigeria is in war. The question is, what is it that the Americans want from the Africans? And I go answer you very quickly. They want their resources. They want their resources. And they're always working constantly with colonial power systems and colonial midgets, puppet governments to drive that agenda. It is written on the wall. There's nothing new that Ethiopia is going through, which they've not tried in Congo, tried in Zimbabwe, even South Africa itself.
There are so many rebels here and there in Africa, and Ethiopia is not the only one having such rebels, but the intensity of the proxy war in Ethiopia is quite unique. When
because rivers are a source
of other countries.
Rivers.
What do you say about
rivers? Rivers are a source of life. Let me tell you now that water in the next 30 years will be as expensive as oil is right now. Water will become a rare commodity. The great river Nile is the source of the war in Ethiopia, is the war in Egypt, is the war in Sudan, is the war is also the war in Uganda. That managing the great river Nile is the real politics, because from that river you have food, you have water and electricity. And that river controls agriculture and food supply. And the river Nile, in terms of the river, it is the source of life for North Africa.
Okay.
And whoever controls the river Nile will control the politics in Ethiopia.
Thank you.
And Egypt, and Sudan, and Uganda, and Kenya.
Many countries these days are insisting their diplomatic communities to leave Ethiopia as quickly as possible. And the Zambia and Sudan from Africa are doing the same.
Diplomacy is not politics. Diplomacy works when there is peace. So you must allow those that want to remove their people from Ethiopia to remove them from Ethiopia, because they are citizens and their embassies are not feeling safe. But the real issue is not the issue of diplomacy in terms of pulling out your diplomatic office from the place, because a diplomat is not a soldier. A diplomat is not a military person. So in all honesty, you cannot expect a country, when they hear that Ethiopia is now in war, that they must leave their diplomatic offices still in operation. So yes, the diplomats must leave Ethiopia, and the soldiers must come in. Because the real issue is not whether you have a diplomatic office open or not. The real issue is Ethiopia is at war. And you don't fight war with diplomats. You fight war with soldiers.
Joshua Mapunga, thank you for your expertise and vivid insight on current issues in Ethiopia. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, sir.
A pleasure.
Pleasure to you, sir.